before the season started, there were a lot of people who were asking why Mike Yastrzemski and Austin Slater essentially were going to be given roles on this team. And when you've got players like Luis Matos waiting in the wings and looking like a potential star of the future. And so with the struggles of a Mike Yastrzemski and an Austin Slater out of the gates here in 2024, those conversations have understandably grown louder. What do you do?
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, except yesterday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015. I've been hosting Locked On Giants for over 5 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where we're live right now. So check us out there if you have not already. If you're hearing me right now live, you're obviously on YouTube. So also hit that subscribe button, please. It helps us out so much, and then you won't miss any episodes. We are Monday through Friday. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we get started, wasn't sure I was going to be able to do this episode. Just view my Twitter account to see what's going on. And I apologize for not being able to get one out yesterday as well. But I did have a little window of opportunity here today, and I just wanted to not go 0 for 2 days in a row without getting out an episode. So here we are, and we're going to answer some of your questions. It's going to be a little less organized than usual simply because of the situation going on for me. But essentially, this is a mailbag edition of the show. And the first, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions that are similar. And Jung-Hoo Lee's dog sitter asks, how long do you give Yaz, Tyro, and Ahmed this leeway to struggle like they have been before letting the young guys get a legit shot to play every day? And so Jung-Hoo Lee's dog sitter doesn't specifically mention Slater, but a lot of you also mention Slater and kind of throw him into that mix as well. And like I said in the open there, these are players who, before the season started, you were hearing, I don't want to say complaining, but, a lot of fans were saying, why does Yastrzemski get basically it should be Matos, not Yastrzemski or Slater. I'm always having to defend Austin Slater. So the long and the short of it is that Mike Yastrzemski's played 9 games. Austin Slater's played 9 games and has 12 plate appearances. And so how long? I mean, just to be perfectly honest with you, at least a month, and probably more like 2 months. Like that's just baseball. Is that if you look all over the league, you'll find on every team players with track records who are either underperforming those track records significantly or overperforming those track records significantly. And only in the beginning of the season does it really stand out in the way that it stands out, because that's all that we have to go by. It's the only numbers that we see. Whereas if you start out hot, like we see all the time, like Matt Chapman, had a hot start, and then you don't hear so much his name come up in these questions, even though the numbers don't even look good at this point. And if you were to look at, Michael Conforto had a 2-game stretch where I think he was like 0 for 8 or something. But if those were his first 2 games, you'd be hearing more about Michael Conforto, So it's just, there's like this beginning of the season bias that always happens, but at the same time I get it. And it's not like we're talking about star players here when we're talking about Yaz and we're talking about Slater. And also you do want to incorporate some of these young guys like Luis Matos. And I have never said for 1 second that I don't think let me be more clear about what I'm saying. I think that Luis Matos should and will get a legitimate opportunity in 2024 to play. And when he came up earlier, he didn't really get that opportunity, but there's no but. I mean, I actually thought he was going to get the opportunity, but Bob Melvin decided to stick Wade Jr. in the outfield and have Wilmer Flores at first. And so the long and the short of it is they kind of trust the guys with track records who are veterans, rather than letting players kind of maybe struggle, perhaps. It's hard. It's hard. But I think ultimately where the opportunities come from are injuries in a lot of cases, because the baseball season is super long. You look at last year, Mike Yastrzemski ended up on the injured list like 4 different times. Austin Slater has been banged up a bunch recently, including in spring training. And Michael Conforto has dealt with some injuries. And so, and Wade, has had a knee issue and blah, blah, blah. So opportunities arise and you never know when they're going to come. And that's often how they come for young players. But at the same time, if you're just wanting to like say, oh, the performance of Yaz and Slater hasn't been good and therefore it's time to like move on. First of all, it's not that simple, because like Austin Slater, you can't option him. He's not a player who has minor league options. Mike Yastrzemski technically could be optioned, and so that would be kind of wild if they were to do that. But certainly 9 games is just never ever even close to enough. And plus, his at bats have been so much better lately. In the last couple of days, he's hit some balls really hard. Remember the ball he hit off the pitcher? Like the pitcher had to come out of the game because that ball was scorched. And so, I loved what Bob Melvin said early. Look, I also love young players, and I think that they need to get those opportunities. It's just such a long season that I think they will get those opportunities, and especially because injuries happen. But Bob Melvin was asked after a game like 3 games ago or so, what gives you confidence that this offense can kind of pick it up and not be so bad? And immediately, without hesitation, he just said track record. And I loved that, because that's what I'm constantly saying on this show is like, you don't have like a 7, 6, 5-year career of doing something and then have like 9 games of doing something and say, yes, it's the 9 games that we should be overly focused on. No, it's the bigger sample weighted towards the more recent games. Yes. The more recent season. Yes. More than the further away seasons. But at the same time, a bigger sample is always more relevant in baseball, and in baseball in particular, not so much like other sports. Guys go through streaks and being hot and being cold, and it just stands out more in the beginning of the season. Like Yaz could go on a 7-game heater and all of a sudden he could be like your best player. Like that kind of thing happens all the time at this stage of a season. And it's the same. It's the opposite is true with guys who are starting out the season hot. They could get cold. The one difference is it doesn't stand out as much because it's not the first chunk of data. And so you kind of remember, oh, Conforto was good. And then he gets a lot more leeway if he struggles for the next 2 weeks. Even if it's like Yaz and Conforto, like say Yaz now gets red hot and Conforto gets ice cold, people will still think of Conforto as like the better, hotter player, even though the performance could be the same, in the whole. So anyway, the point being, also, I will just say Ahmed has been hot. He started out cold, but he went 3 for 3 in his latest game. And by FanGraphs wins above replacement, he's been their best offensive player, ahead of Michael Conforto, because of defense. But also he's got a 282 batting average, 317 on base, hasn't hit for power, but also hasn't struck out and has played good defense. And so Nick Ahmed hasn't really been a problem, I would say. But Yaz and Slater, for me, it's track record. And I just believe in the track record more than I believe in a 9-game sample. But at the same time, I do want to emphasize, I really think it's important that Matos and Luciano in particular, I'm not such a believer in Heliot Ramos, get chances this year, but it's just such a long season that I think they will have those opportunities. I didn't mention Tyro. It's been rough offensively for Tyro, but again, track record is just miles better than what we've seen. And so I would lean on that ahead of a 13 game sample of it being rough. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, more questions and answers talking about Patrick Bailey, uncharacteristically not having a good defensive start to the season. So we'll get into that and much more in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by Ibotta. Spring has sprung, and that means spring cleaning. Whether that means stocking up on cleaning supplies or swapping out your winter clothes for new spring clothes, make sure you're using Ibotta and get real cash back with every purchase. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. All right, as promised, we are going to get into the defensive struggles of Patrick Bailey, which is I think it was Eric Engel who does the Locked On Giants postcast, which we'll mention in just a minute, saying that that's not something he had on his bingo card, was Patrick Bailey struggling defensively to start the season. And that's what I'm saying. That's kind of the beauty and the frustration of baseball, is that I say more so the beauty is that you can't predict it. And especially in small samples, you can't predict it. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, on Monday, we're going to be breaking down this series in Tampa. I think it's going to be a tough series. The Rays are very savvy in a number of ways, and you're going to have to play good baseball to beat them. And so we'll be wrapping that up and previewing the Giants going to Miami, not far away from Tampa. But also a reminder that you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search the word Giants. And also a reminder, not only do we cover your team every day, but now we are giving you instant episodes after every single game, including tonight. So check out the Locked On Giants postcast right here on the Locked On Giants podcast feed, as well as streaming on the Locked On Sports Bay Area YouTube channel. So if you're on YouTube right now, open a new tab, check out Locked On Sports Bay Area, hit that subscribe button, the bell notification. We are providing, not me, I'm not hosting the show, it's Eric Engel, but it's just an additional Giants reaction from Locked On, where you can jump in on the conversation immediately after games, which is typically not how I do my shows. So this is just an addition. It's just more content for you. So check it out. Get rapid reaction to all the biggest moments with the Locked On Giants postcast with Eric Engel. So, like I said, a little less organized in terms of who asked what question, but there were a bunch of questions about Patrick Bailey's defense. And so here's one from Megan Curry, who says, not only is Patrick Bailey not as efficient at throwing runners out this year, he also seems to drop a lot of easy pitches to catch. Do you think this is going to be a problem going forward, not to mention the passed balls? So I've certainly noticed the same thing, especially with the throws. And it's funny because some of the scouting reports that I had read on Patrick Bailey prior to him getting called up, or some stuff I read when he did get called up, just to kind of get myself acclimated and familiar, was that he makes a lot of sidearm throws that often have tailing action because of the angle of his arm. He throws a two-seamer essentially, where it doesn't go straight and it tails, from his perspective to the right. And that's what's been happening. And so he's just not getting on top of the ball. Like, even if you're throwing from the side, you got to get on top of the ball. Otherwise, you're going to kind of have it sail on you like that. So I'm not particularly worried. Again, it's like, what's more relevant? All of what we saw last season, or the handful of throws and blocks and whatever that we've seen in far fewer games this season? My answer is you lump it all together. And the other answer I have for you, or like that I want to provide, is that my understanding, based really on StatCast data, is that pitch framing is by far the most important element of defense for a catcher. Okay, so like, catchers do different things defensively. They frame, they throw, they block. And that's for the most part what they do. And framing, when all is said and done, they provide so much. This is why people ask about the knee down technique, right? All the time. And it gets brought up on the broadcasts all the time. Like, catchers having one knee down and how it makes them worse blockers. And the reason for it is it makes them better framers, and framing is just like a zillion times more impactful over the course of a season than blocking. And the reason for that is that every single pitch is an opportunity for a strike or a ball, and a strike versus a ball makes a monumental difference. Like, I could literally do an entire episode only talking about the impact of the count. Like, what is the count? And so when you can turn a ball into a strike, when you can turn, a strike into a strike that would have otherwise been called a ball, for example, it makes a huge difference. Hitters get so much worse when a strike is thrown versus when a ball is thrown. And they get so much better when a ball is thrown versus when a strike is thrown. And this season, Patrick Bailey, already among catchers who are qualified, and there's 53 of them, he does rank 11th in framing. And the way that they judge this is what percent of pitches that are in what they call the shadow zone, which is like, I forget how many inches. It's like 1.5. I don't remember how many inches, but like, think of it like maybe a ball's width of on either side of the edges of the strike zone. Basically, borderline pitches is how I like to call it, not shadow zone. And so what percent of borderline pitches are called strikes? And for Patrick Bailey, he's so far this year gotten 49.3%, and the league average is 46.5%. So 3 percentage points ish higher than the league average on borderline pitches. And so that is more impactful even than the throws and then blocking. It just is, because it happens on every single pitch where you get that opportunity to make an impact on a strike versus a ball. I mean, not every pitch is borderline, granted, but there are a lot of borderline pitches. Like, almost every at bat, you're getting borderline pitches. And when you can make that conversion from potential ball to actual strike, it makes a big difference. And so when I look at, so I'm on Baseball Savant looking that up. Patrick Bailey, I think, was like the best framer last year in all baseball. And so that's what made him so great defensively. Yeah, he was 52.9%. And again, it was over a much larger sample. And for last year, that's 16 runs is what StatCast estimates to be the impact of that, is 16 runs. So let's not forget that when we look at some of these other metrics. So if we look at, how about pop time? Patrick Bailey in 2024 ranks 3rd in pop time. Okay, so I guess pop time doesn't really matter. Pop time is the time from when it hits the catcher's glove to when it arrives in the vicinity of second base. It's not actually when it hits the glove, because the glove might be in front of the base, behind the base, like to the right, to the left, whatever. But yeah, so you've got to be accurate, right? But there's also, they do There's more metrics we could look into, but he does still rank third. He's actually tied essentially for first in pop time. And so he's top 10-ish in framing this year. He's top 3 in pop time. And let's just look at last year and see that he was number 4 in pop time. And let me see too about stolen bases, like caught stealings for Bailey so far. He has, oh, it doesn't even say. It doesn't say. So there's only been 7 attempts against him. It doesn't show me how many times he's caught the runners. But let's look at, let us look at blocking, because that's one where we're going to see, even last year, Patrick Bailey didn't grade out particularly well as a blocker. And this season, he is towards the bottom. I mean, there's 58 qualified catchers here, and he's 51st with -2 blocks above average. So, but the best player is at +3. And if we look at last year, though, this is where it really gets important to understand, is that last season, the best catcher in the game was at blocking. It says it was Sean Murphy with +16 blocks above average. But how many runs do they equate to that? 4. Whereas remember what I said with Bailey alone, or no, he was number 1, and it was 16 runs. And so the best framer is giving you 16 runs with their framing, and the best blocker is getting you only 4. And the worst blocker was -5, and it was actually Blake Sable. And so clearly the Giants, and Bailey was 62nd out of 68 players with -9 blocks above average, but it was only -2 runs according to this metric. And so I don't know exactly the math or whatever that goes into it, but it's been determined by people who are a lot smarter than I am what the run value is of just blocks above average. And it's just far, far. I mean, Bailey's -9 blocks above average costs them 2 runs versus average compared to 16 runs with framing. So that completely goes to show you, like, it's less about blocks and more about framing, and it's less about throwing and more about framing. So there is also a metric here called catcher throwing. So I just want to see where Bailey's at here, if he shows up anywhere. He shows up 12th as he has a 1 caught stealing above average. That's the thing, is like, these bases may have been stolen anyway, and StatCast is looking at this. Like, it may be on the pitchers. He has 2 caught stealings, and he has an estimated caught stealing of 1. Okay, so, and if we look at 2023, where did Patrick Bailey rank in this category? He was 2nd in all of baseball with 15 caught stealings with an estimated caught stealing number of 9. So he caught 6 more than expected, basically. And the run translation was only 4 runs. So again, what was it? -2 he put up for blocking and being one of the worst, plus 4 runs for caught stealings above average. And he's second best, and yet 16 runs for framing. And so hopefully that's like enough of an answer for you, because that's how I view it. Is just like the most important thing he's doing defensively is the way he's catching pitches, and dropping pitches. Yeah, whatever. I mean, as long as they're, I mean, this metric, this framing metric, takes into account whether, like, did you get a strike call or not? So if he's dropping strikes and turning them into balls, that's going to be a knock against him. But yet he's still ranking about top 10 in framing, and he was number 1 last year. So all of that to say, I'm not particularly worried at all defensively about the framing of Patrick Bailey. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to turn our attention to the pitching staff, because Jordan Hicks has clearly established himself in just 3 starts as a starter, when that was a big question coming into the season. So if he's healthy and the rest of everyone's healthy, what do they do? What does the staff look like when you get Alex Cobb back? What about when you get Robbie Ray back? What is that staff going to look like? We will get into it in just a minute, and before we do, Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. This is like, it could not be more of a no-brainer. One of the things I'm looking at, I'm just checking out the odds for today's game, which is going to get started in about an hour as we do this live show on YouTube at 2:40 right now. Giants are favorites in Tampa with a point spread, or point run spread, I guess, of -1.5. And a money line of -102. Over under is set at 8.5 runs, but you can literally bet on anything and get 150 in bonus bets back. It's a can't lose situation there. So again, visit fanduel.com/lockedon. Make that first bet an automatic dub. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by LinkedIn. Are you struggling to close deals? B2B selling is tougher than ever, and that's why I want to talk to you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals such as job changes or which accounts you should prioritize, and shows you hidden allies so you can find those buyers that are most likely to convert. Fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That's linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon to get started. All right, as promised, we are going to discuss the pitching staff with Jordan Hicks, like I said, basically after one start, establishing himself as someone, there was a lot of skepticism about Hicks being a starter after spending his whole career as a reliever, outside of a little experiment in 2022, I think it was, with the Cardinals. He was a starter in his minor league career before getting rushed to the majors because he was hitting 100 on the gun. And but Jordan Hicks has a 1 ERA through 3 starts, and so it's like he's not going anywhere, at least as long as his arm holds up. There's been some visits from trainers that scared me every time, but he's come out of it fine. So right now, I mean, currently Keaton Winn goes tonight, and then the beauty of how deep and good this rotation is then it flips over again back to Logan Webb, and then it's Blake Snell, Kyle Harrison, Jordan Hicks. And so that is it already is a strong rotation. And as Blake Snell continues to build himself up, as Kyle Harrison continues to kind of go through his ups and downs and hopefully kind of calm down and be more of a consistent force, which I think we all can foresee happening given the stuff that he has and some of the flashes of dominance that he has, including in his latest start. This has the makings of an excellent rotation, but it's a good question. Like, what do you do when you get... So when Alex Cobb comes back, which is going to be before Robbie Ray, they just released an update. So he had a little setback with his elbow recently, but he's back to throwing this week. And so, I think the expectation is that he'll be back in May at some point, maybe early May. So I would imagine that bumps out Keaton Winn, because the rest of the guys, Webb, Snell, I'd probably put Hicks in that 3 spot, and then I don't know, Harrison or Cobb maybe 4th, and then Harrison 5th. That's pretty strong. And so then Keaton Winn maybe takes that Kai Wei Tang spot in the bullpen, something like that. And when Robbie Ray comes back, I got no answers for you. That's my answer, is I don't have an answer, because that's the thing. Okay, like injuries happen. I hate to say it, but like these questions often resolve themselves. And maybe it's not a question. Like we're talking after the All-Star break. Like a lot could be different and you just don't know. And so it's just one of those things not really worth worrying about at this point. But a lot of the questions that were asked, and again, a little discombobulated, didn't name anyone by name, but there were a lot of people who asked this question, and y'all prefaced it by saying, assuming full health. And so, assuming full health, Logan Webb, Blake Snell, Jordan Hicks, Robbie Ray, Alex Cobb, and then do you have room for Kyle Harrison? You know, so I don't think they go to a 6-man rotation. And so I honestly, like, this is just one of those questions where I really don't have an answer. Maybe they do go to a 6-man rotation just to kind of give guys, you know, like Harrison and Hicks. Maybe they piggyback, like maybe they just like back off of Harrison a little bit just to limit his innings. I mean, Robbie Ray is not going to be able to just come in and start throwing 8 innings right away. And so maybe they do go to a 6-man rotation, assuming full health. That includes Harrison, and that would be one heck of a rotation. So that's the thing. Like, assuming health is like famous last words. Like you, I just wouldn't assume health. First of all, that people have setbacks, new injuries crop up, et cetera, especially with pitchers. So obviously, I don't hope for any injuries, but. And if they are healthy, that's great news, and they're probably having a good season with that kind of personnel in that starting rotation. But let me know what you think. What would you do if everybody was healthy? Like, what do? You go to a 6-man rotation? I think that's the most logical answer, given that you're probably trying to manage the innings of Harrison, Hicks, Cobb, and Robbie Ray. And so, or you could have guys, you could have like piggyback starts where you go like Cobb and Robbie Ray, or like Harrison and Hicks, because you're trying to kind of ease them into this role and not have them just jump out there and throw 200 innings in season 1, really, of being full-time starters. So anyway, that's all I got for you today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Remember, you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. And not only do we cover your team every day, but now we are giving you instant episodes after every single game. Check out the Locked On Giants postcast right here on the Locked On Giants podcast feed, as well as streaming on the Locked On Sports Bay Area YouTube channel. Get rapid reaction, including tonight, to all the biggest moments with the Locked On Giants postcast. Also, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out tremendously. So thank you in advance, and thank you so much to everyone who's done so already. Giants versus Rays coming up this weekend. We'll be back with on Monday. Every dayers, you'll hear about all 3 games to get you set for Miami. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for understanding about yesterday, no episode and all that. So really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed today's show. You are now Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I put out the wrong thing like 3 times, but this is the right one.